What are you?
This meeting is being recorded.
Hang on a second. What was that?
Whereabouts in the world are you?
I live in, well,
Is that a secret?
I'm not saying on the recording. I can tell you guys in private, but now that we're recording,
Yeah.
I'm in America, in a part of the country, where none of the nonsense that's transpired over the last 2 years ever existed. So I haven't experienced what the majority of the world has experienced since I left Los Angeles. But yeah, I was in Los Angeles when all that started, which is why I got the hell out of there. But,
Well done.
yeah, but I don't mind telling you guys off camera, but I don't want,
No,
Fair
fair
enough.
enough. Fair enough. Well, nice to meet you. I'm Bella.
I'm Amanda.
Nice to meet you. I'm Dylan
How do you say your surname?
Secotio.
Secotio.
Okay. All
Right.
right.
Well, the soft C's, Secotio.
Secotio. So it's Italian, isn't it?
Yeah, it would be if you were in Italy, it would be Secoccio, but just for everybody in like America, it's a big family. It's Secotio. So
Not connected.
that's how they say it.
it.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean,
Recording.
where I'm from, yeah, my family used to run around with people like Nikki Bianco and the Patriarca crime family. So you guys can look that up and
Okay, cool.
yeah. And believe it or not, the Godfather is very true in terms of a lot of these old orders, especially with Cosa Nostra, these like oaths of omerta and stuff. You'll see that with all the religious cults like the Jesuits and all that stuff. So it's all part of the same system, and that's why I wrote these books, because I think a lot of people, they see a lot of the symptoms of this terrible system that's all over the world, but very few people can actually piece it together. And everyone wants to play the blame game, not realizing that it's all part of the same system. And so that's what my goal is, to hopefully bring awareness to the fact that it's a very old system, but it's the same system. And to what degree it's being controlled now, I can't tell you. But through history, you can see how ultimately it's going to be the priest class, and they always lay claim of the land on behalf of God, and they use these allegories as to justify their authority, and they teach the masses that these allegories are history, and the people believe it. And so what ends up happening, like even in places like England and all that stuff, like feudalism in Europe, you see all these you see these people that look powerful, but if you look closer, they're really just tenants of the land. The church gave it to them. And if they ever stop paying a tenth of their productivity, they'll find out who really owns that land. So even like the lords and stuff aren't as powerful as people would think, the kings and all that stuff. And you see that with a very brief blip in history, America broke away from it. And so like a couple of generations back, people in, at least in where I'm from, you bought your property in pounds sterling. And so by using the reason they in the Constitution, it says no state shall use any other thing but gold and silver coin to tender debt. Well, that's so you could own your property in allodium. Once they got us off of gold and silver with the crime, it started with the crime of 1873, but then with the Emergency Banking Relief Act of 1933, we've been using debt notes. And so you can't discharge debt to satisfy a debt. So now we have to pay taxes on everything because we're not actually satisfying any debts. Whereas the old system, you use gold and silver, and there's still people in this country that don't pay taxes on their property because their land's been paid off for that long, but they can't parcel it out or sell it because once they do, they're in the new commercial system, and then they'll have to pay taxes. So it's we can get back to it, but it takes people becoming aware all over the world of what's going on. And the sad thing is because people are so religious and superstitious, they won't look at what's really going on, because it's easy for them to blame every other religion, but then once it comes for them time to look at their own religion, they can't do it.
Yes, absolutely. It's just such a way of control, isn't it? And people, it's also too, people don't want to look in. It's having to look in to have to actually do the work to see that something's not sitting right. Is that, you know, people have really, I guess, just lost touch with nature and lost touch with themselves, and they take everything as gospel, right? And it's his story, which is like a play on words, isn't it? Which is what, I guess, that's your genius.
It's a play on Herodotus. It's a play on the first historian's story. It's his
Yeah.
story. That's when the Greeks first allegedly started like recording history. But even then, he didn't know that, you know, half the stuff he's looking at is allegory anyway, not real.
And so I guess it's such I guess, what is it, food for thought, really, or words for thought. And so we're really excited to have you on our podcast today. I found you through surfing through Instagram and became aware of your books that you have written. You've written multiple books. The books before SpiritWhirled, they were just your like mythology books, creative writing as such.
Yeah, so I was doing this work in encoding it in a fantasy story. And so I was writing a fantasy series, which that's like my passion. It's called The Tale of Honora. I want to get that made into films and TV someday. But this country, my country anyway, I can't speak for anyone else, it just started getting so corrupt, and the things that was going on, it was getting so bad that I had to put that on hold and just like, all right, I got to be a little more aggressive with this, because you know, I've seen what's happening now. You can see they've been planning this for a long time. So it's, you know, it's hard. The problem is, at the time when I was writing those, I was still in Hollywood, and Hollywood is very, you're really quick to get blackballed. Like if you do anything that goes against the grain, people that, you know, were your friends for years will turn on you. And it's not like they'll turn on you in bad, but they'll just like disappear and your connections will dry up. And so there's that kind of fear, and that's why you don't see like celebrities and all that stuff. People aren't really going to speak out against it because they don't want to lose their livelihood or their lifestyle, you know.
Yeah, completely.
So yeah, so I got into that, and then so like I prepared some things for you because you wanted to kind of go into language, but since your audience hasn't really been exposed to my work, what I did is I put together a bunch of things from like the beginning of like book one, but also in my new book that just came out a couple months ago. I don't know if you can see that. It's a Godsacre for Winds of the Soul. There's going to be some more language mechanics in the beginning of that book as well. So I kind of put together a little, you know, few pages of information that can kind of show people how language works, how the priest class uses it. Historically, that's been their advantage. You know, people forget because we're all literate, and well, most of us. But if somebody's watching this, they're probably literate and can read and write. But that's a thing that like even kings and stuff, you know, royalty couldn't do back in the day. That's why you have signatures. They would have symbols that they would write on their documents. And so the way the priest class always kept control was they would change the laws, and the scripture. The law of the land was like the law of God, you know. It was commingled, and so they would just manipulate it, and nobody could do anything about it, because if you can't read, how would you know?
There's so much corruption, really, and the corruption all the way back, doesn't it? And it's just been weaved throughout millennia, time and time again, which is why like the system is slowly starting to break. But I mean, whether it breaks completely and we evolve consciously to, you know, become a unified field together. It's such an interesting one, because I guess for our listeners it's kind of really giving them a breakdown, I guess, through language and your book, and sort of like what it means, spirit world, and how you can start to really create curiosity and start to, I guess,
lift the
veil. Yeah, because for many of our listeners, they're already curious, right? They're already pretty awake in terms of like consciousness within their own body. But when it comes to sort of like the system, it'd be a great way for you to kind of like take us on a journey.
Yeah, and it's also important for like people to, because I've also seen when people get into this, they'll start taking like they'll put so much weight into every single word that then it's like everything's like a spell or whatever, and they'll start like trapping themselves. And it's important for people not to get caught up in all that, because at the end of the day, words are just we would speak without written language. If a language was never created, we would all have different dialects of the same thing. And like you can see it with babies. They know when they're hungry, right? You can't understand them, but they think they're communicating. You know, people in foreign languages, that we all have the same needs, right? If we couldn't speak, we would have sign, you know, hungry, or, you know, whatever. You'd have all these little ways to communicate. And so it's important for people to realize that the language doesn't enslave you. Even your intent of it, it's just an expression. And so don't get like superstitious about it all, because I see a lot of people enslaving themselves now because it's like they're afraid to use certain words, right? And that's another thing. If you can limit somebody's words and say, well, that's an unacceptable word to use, well, then you can restrict their thought. And that's why free speech is such a big deal, because the less words you can use, the less mediums you have to express yourself. You know, it's a slippery slope.
Which is what's happening, right, worldwide, in terms of like, weren't able to.
Yeah, I'm censored on everything. I'm not even political. Like, I don't even vote. I don't care about politics really, because I just see it as all the same corrupt institution. But even I'm censored on everything. Like, it's crazy. And it's just because of the algorithms. They're designed to take down if you use any of their little trigger words. So I've gotten used to not saying any of those keywords, so I'll be good about it. But we don't have to talk about modern stuff anyways, just because I think everybody's already done it. It's played out, and what we're going to be talking about is more interesting. So tying into that language, and feel free to jump in, right? So don't feel like, you know, you have to let me like go and go and go, but I'm happy to. But
happy to hold the space for you, right?
No, sit back, you know, grab yourself a nice hot beverage or whatever, or some booze, and, you know, enjoy yourself. But tying into that, the reason language is so, and I'm going to quote an archbishop, and I put this quote in the beginning of my first book, and he said, "Many a single word also is itself a concentrated poem, having stories of poetical thought and imagery laid up in it. Examine it, and it will be found to rest on some deep analogy of things natural and things spiritual, bringing those to illustrate and to give an abiding form and body to these. For certainly, in itself, there is no study which may be at once more instructive and entertaining than the study of the use, origin, and distinction of words." Now, one of the things you'll see people doing currently, and which is why it's so critical to buy books in physical form, and especially like dictionaries, all that stuff, is you'll see they're starting to change the definitions of things, especially if it's online, because they can just scrub everything and redo it to conform to their corruption. And so they're doing that right now on Wikipedia with the word recession, because America's going circling the drain. But so one of the things I encourage people to do is study the different definitions throughout history, because their meanings, they change with the whims of man, and the vernacular and the evolutions or devolutions of those words in the language of the people. And included in this is philology, and how letters interchange in different languages, and how the systems of language evolved in different regions based on that. For example, like for you, Bella, your name, it means beautiful in Italian, but the root of that Baal means Lord. But you'll see this, especially with like the Syrians, they interchange the B. It goes all the way back to Bali in Indonesia, in Asia. They changed the B and the P. So then Bel became Pala. So B-A-L or B-A-A-L. A's interchange with E's, and so when you start seeing how different languages interchange the letters, like in Greek and Hebrew, the E and the H are the same letter. It would be Ada in Greek, it would be Hey in Hebrew. So when you can see that, the more you understand philology, the more or the less a word's origin or nature can be concealed from you. And when you're a priest class, this is a way of hiding secrets, because if somebody hasn't the knowledge of language, then they can't notice the patterns and crack the code of what you're hiding. That's why they do that. So just like to start off how like words like originate, they basically convey a simple idea. But over time, through perhaps like bad or unfavorable circumstances, especially things like war and commerce and all that stuff, with the degradation of a man's character and vernacular, they become something that conveys usually like a malignant idea. So you'll see words like knave, which once meant a lad, but now means a dishonest or unscrupulous man. A boor was once a farmer, but is now an unrefined, ill-mannered person. A menial was one of the household, but now is work, or it's a task not requiring skill and lacking prestige, like a menial job. Or as a noun, it's one who works a menial job. Things like a minion was once a favorite, but now it's a follower or like underling of a powerful person, especially a servile or unimportant one. The word daft used to mean modest, but now it means foolish. Orgies, that's a funny word, but during like the era of the Eleusinian and Bacchic mysteries, orgies were religious rites. And now look what they are. And so
A little bit different.
it's wild because that's another word for labors too. So like when you see like the labors of Hercules or Oedicles, you'll see like sometimes like the orgies and all that stuff. So it's important to understand that it's not as perverted as people think. But if you're looking at it from now when it's been perverted, it can be confusing. Dapper, that's one, it used to mean brave and bold, but now it means neat and trim. The word plausible used to mean worthy of applause. Now it means seeming reasonable or probable. The word lewd used to mean unlearned, but now it means crude and offensive in a sexual way, lewd conduct. To resent, it used to just be repay or return as action or benefit, whether it's kind or injurious. But now resent is to feel bitterness or indignation at a circumstance, action, or a person. And you can see it if we say resent, to resent someone, but it literally is just resent. So you can see that idea of resending something. The
opposing factors, really, isn't it? It's like opposing each other. The words are.
It's gone from like
From
one
one
extreme
extreme
to
to
the
the
other.
other.
Almost.
And who changes them? The
Um,
priests?
Well, I think it's one of the corruptions. As like languages are made common, the people do their own thing with it. And that's why like a language like Sanskrit is unique, because it's the only language in the world that still follows its grammatical rules, because it was never really made common. It was a priestly language. And so like, for example, like I'm reading a lot of documents and like letters and shit from like the 1600s and the 1700s, and they capitalize everything that's a noun, not just like names or like the beginning of like a sentence. So like if it's a noun, it's capitalized. But so you see the grammarians, they improve on that. We no longer capitalize nouns and stuff in the middle of a sentence. It's just stuff that has an important name, titles, etc. But yeah, so like you'll see this over and over again, but it's really just, it's up to the people.
Because it's also
But in
like, I guess it's like, sorry, with like
no, go ahead.
it has a sacredness to it. That's why it hasn't really, been out, or it's not publicized, and it's only those that have studied it that really get to see its true nature and in its true form.
It's almost passed down, like it's sort of an
It's the
honor to be
knowledge.
able to have that knowledge to learn Sanskrit. Like you're sort of invited in, and maybe that's because, like you said, it's not like a common language. There's no dialect or, different sort of versions of it. Like it's all pretty unified.
Exactly. And it's so, and that's, it harkens back to that as their way of like their secret way of communicating. And, like even like a word like animosity used to mean like the soul, like spirit, anima. It used to mean spiritedness. And now it means strong. So like if you have animosity towards someone, you're hostile towards them. You have a strong hostility. And the word retract was to reconsider. But now we say retract and it's to withdraw or take back. Things like words like even like a word like paradise, it once just meant a royal park or a garden of delights in all the Oriental language. think about, so this, remember how I was saying in the beginning, like people get like super, what's the word, superstitious? Well, here's one for that. Like the word passion used to mean suffering, hence the passion of the Christ. So someone who is passionate is suffering something to be done with him. And even the word suffer, if you go back, it means to allow. Like to suffer evil is to allow evil. And so now you can see, like in that word, people have changed what passion is. And, we're like, follow your passions, so it's like, you're literally, if you wanted to get, if you're not looking at the intent, you could be saying, follow your suffering. So, you kind of see how, like, that's why some people get deep into this and their mind is like, they're seeing the code in the matrix and they can get a little too
I feel like once you get
superstitious.
one little insight into it,
That's
like
right.
it would just be never ending. You'd constantly be seeking more knowledge, like, which is amazing.
Yes, but where I'm going with all this though is, we can only go so far back with artifacts, with historical documents, but the one thing that is timeless is language. And if you can trace the origin of a word, and the more words you have from a culture's language, the more dots you can connect about their history. Like even like a word like kind, like kindness, right? That comes from kin, like your family, right? So we see that kindness is a debt of kin, and treating others as though they are kin, it's a debt of love. And
Which is the
there are
universal.
those. Yeah, go ahead.
No, I was just saying, it's like the universal language, really, isn't it? Or the universal religion is what we need to come back to, which is love.
Yeah, and it's still there. It's just been disguised and divided up, so it really is still, it's all still under the underlying current between everything. Just people can't recognize it because we live in the too long didn't read generation, and people don't really explore language because it's kind of boring at first, until you get like, it's just like everything. Once you learn it, it becomes way more exciting once you get a little bit more advanced with it. And that's what I try to do with my books, is kind of chart my progress so people can, have a fun way of looking at it and expedite the process. But yeah, it's owing a debt of kin is to be kind. And it's, like even like in like the Greek, right? So like idiot was once a word for a private man who took his share in the management of public affairs but held no office. And so the Greeks called that an idiota, right? Idiotas. And that's how it was used all the way up to the 17th century. Now it's used, an idiot is, now everyone thinks of something totally different when they hear the word idiot. But that, before that, the reason that word existed is because Greek culture mandated contact with public life and participation in it because it was necessary for developing the intellect. It's not like now so much, whereas everybody's like, everybody wants results and wants somebody else to do the suffering and the hard work to get those results for them and to bear the responsibility. And that's kind of why you have the elites behaving the way they do, is because the majority of people are kind of like livestock at this point. They don't really want to be independent. They say they do, but they really don't. When you look at their behavior and what's really coming out of them, they like the slavery. Otherwise, we wouldn't have this,
Well, they're
I think
happy
that's
to.
how we've ended up where we are after these 2 years, because I think there is that sort of undertone of wanting someone else to make these hard decisions for them and wanting someone else to kind of deal with it in a way, to just kind of go on, to not have to think too deep about it or to not get into the nitty gritty, just kind of that surface level would just skate along. But I think that's how we kind of got here, because collectively we decided, let's just let someone else make these decisions for us.
Yeah, because people don't really want to sit in their suffering. It's too hard. It's easy to be distracted, isn't it? And so
Yeah, one of the
like everything's
go
by
ahead.
design when you think about it. It's so well designed.
Well, it's also not an accident that, everyone's sort of feeling like sort of just indifferent towards something as well. Like, how our food systems are treated, what we're doing to the air and, our water, our pineal glands are calcified. We are sort of numbed.
Yeah, we're numb right down.
Mm.
We're
It's funny that you said
dumbified,
that.
essentially, aren't we? We're dumbified.
Well, no,
Or
I think you said
what?
it. You said it indifferent. You know, you said it. It's the I don't care. And you know, somebody who I acknowledged in book 1, Mark Passio, he used to say there's 3 words that erect the prison around you. I don't care. But then he said there's also 3 words that change everything. And it's I was wrong. Because once you can admit that you were wrong, you can actually start seeing why, which means you're going to be right, and then you can start doing something and behaving, aligning with right behavior as opposed to wrong behavior. But I think you just hit the nail on the head with it's indifferent. And I think when you have a lifestyle where you're just getting you're everybody's paying you just enough to keep from getting fired, and you're working just enough to keep from quitting, you know, everybody's just surviving, the majority of people, and they can't be bothered to care. So it's like at some point you either are going to get ejected from that, you're going to run yourself into the ground in that, or you're going to be successful in that. And the people, you know, once you're successful in winning, who wants to change the system when it benefits them?
Mm-hmm.
So there's that too. And what going back to what you're saying about the responsibility, one of my favorite quotes is from Voltaire, and it is, freedom requires responsibility, which is why most men dread it.
Mm.
And you know, it does take courage to stand up and courage to break break your routine, because we are creatures of habits. But you know, speaking of that, like, think of the word virtue. That comes from Latin virtus. So this meant warlike courage and manliness, and it was pertaining to like battle, right? But then as so a virtuoso in Italian, it used to be a virtuous man. But as the Roman Empire faded away and Italy, you know, basically suffered every kind of ruin due to her weak leadership, you know, in the vacuum of a collapsing empire, a virtuoso became a skilled artist or a craftsman, and it disregards all measurements of his character when it didn't used to be like that. And so this is what I'm saying. When you understand this, the history, just the history of a single word reveals you, or it reveals what has happened in that culture. And so like moving to like, you know, more in Europe, because that's what my background is. I'm sure, I think you two probably have connection to European descent. The Celtic language became extinct in Gaul and Spain before Latin. And so the English we speak today is a blend of the Norman and Saxon languages. And this is why we have Norse influence in our language. And the last Saxon king was killed at the Battle of Hastings on Blood Lake Hill, which is Senlac Hill. And when the animals are in the wild or alive, they retain the Saxon names. But once they've been harvested and served to the table, they go by the Norman names. So in the Saxon names, you'd have names like cow, steer, ox. But once they're on the table, the meat's called beef. So while alive, a pig would be called a swine in Saxon, but then in Norman, once it's on the table, it's called pork. And then the same pattern, calf, Saxon, becomes veal in Norman. Sheep, Saxon, becomes mutton in Norman. Deer in Saxon becomes venison in Norman. And then fowl in Saxon becomes pullet in Norman. That right there, just knowing that, reveals a history in England between all these different cultures coming here, between the Saxons, the Norman, from Normandy, France, and you know, the Northmen, to the Danes, all of that stuff. And so going back to like things like philology and the interchangeability of letters, you'll see in Latin the word far, F-A-R, means corn, and that's where the word like farm comes from. And it's associated with things like spelt, grain, and meal. And that F replaces H in a similar way that words like letters like L and R interchange, i.e. loyal, royal, legal, regal, lex, law in Latin, rex, king. That Roy is king in French as well. Means so those words are going to pertain to that rulership class. But the letter O is also OI, which when you put that O and the I together, it makes the A, if you look at the lowercase a. So words like farium and horium are also the same words, just created by different, just like little changing of letters, but it's basically the same word. And so that alteration makes them mean different things. So farium means maize, which is corn, and then horium means barn. So all these little tricks, if you know what you're looking at, open up a history that is otherwise not available to you. And that's what's like really, you think about language and words, it really is a magic. It doesn't exist in this physical reality. Like I'm literally, because I know that, I'm tapping into something that's not even tangible. And so everybody else listening can do that, and your whole world will open up once you learn these skill sets. And it's pretty easy. It just requires doing the work.
So
Your ability to see things.
have you
Yeah,
done
go
a
ahead.
lot of research, or is it that you just went away and then were channeled part of this, or a combination of both?
It's a combination of both. For me, this whole journey for me started off with being around the cult myself and knowing something was wrong, but also getting this sense of like it had an ancient feel. Like there's not a single person you can blame for any of this, unfortunately. It's a really old system, and it took a while for me to like put the pieces together. And there are some people out there who are, parts of these cults that are good. And if you know these things, if you can educate yourself, they can reveal things to you without breaking their oaths. Because if you know this stuff, certain things can't be concealed from you. So you could give somebody a question, and that if that person's smart enough, they can, in a roundabout way, find the answer. But you have to know the language.
Yeah.
And so even though that person didn't tell me and didn't break any oaths, they can show you where to look. So there's a combination of that. There's a combination of reading old books. There's a combination of people who were also part of the cults themselves and kind of broke away and tried to expose it. And there's some really good things in there. And then, there is,
Because
I would be lying to you if I said there wasn't a spiritual aspect to this when you start doing this work.
Yeah.
I mean,
It's,
that's the sort of like,
I mean, it's just it's still part of this world, right? It's the spirit, it's not separate.
no, it's unified. We are one.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah,
and
I
that's
mean,
what we learn in Chinese medicine, and that's what you learn in Ayurvedic. And we're both Vedic meditators as well, which comes back to that whole sense of unified field, which is really interesting because I think you mentioned there, it was like you just had a sense within yourself that something didn't feel right. And so it's having to really listen to that subtlety within our body of having that embodiment to go, okay, I need to actually change trajectory here in my life to move paths because something doesn't feel right. Because we did a podcast, because this one's dedicated to the men in our lives, because we feel like, I guess, so much has changed of where we are currently in the universe and these times. And it's like men have lost their direction. And as you were saying before with the play on words, the virtuoso of man, is that it's like we want men to be able to come back, to be able to find that man within themselves again, right? To come forward and really just start to fight. We've got to not
well, it's
fight.
because men have listened to women for the past 60 years. Hey ladies, get in touch with your feminine side.
So true.
Well, I think we're living in the masculine. We
get in touch with our feminine side, and all of a sudden we're not attractive anymore. So yeah, you're damned if you do, you're damned
all
if
this
you don't.
gender stuff going on right at the moment.
Yeah. Now you can be whatever you want to be, because language has no meaning, right? And that's exactly that is real sorcery through word magic, what they're doing with that.
Yeah.
And this idea that we have to, like, it's one thing to want to be called something, but to actually try to warp someone's mind to believing that, no, I am this now because I said so, and you have to believe that and accept that. It's like 2 + 2 = 5. It's really, that in itself is really creepy. And I've experienced having to go to training and listen to a guy who is in a dress, has a beard, long hair, has got lipstick. I mean, it's like lipstick on a pig. And he's like, I have to look at him as something other than what he is. And so it's like they're asking us to betray our senses to accommodate their mental illness. It's a real problem. It's a real problem because what happens is once these people, they pretend like they're nice and they just wanted equal rights, but then once they get that equal rights, they make a power grab and they're actually ruthless. And so that's what you see is a lot of these people, they are absolutely ruthless, they're psychopathic, and they do wickedness. But then if you respond, they're like, they hop into victim status mode. So like everybody feels bad for them, right? So it's like they're committing atrocities, but then when you fight back, it's like, you're hurting me. Why are you hurting me? You know, and it's like, there's a real fucking problem that people can't address because everybody's scared of losing their job. They're scared of losing the getting cancel culture.
No, oh my God, cancel culture. That's it. But there's always
That's happened in my first book.
Oh.
Like if you go to my first book in my fantasy series back in like 2016, they left a bunch of fake reviews and then they voted them all up. So that's all you see when you go to the landing page in America. In other countries, you won't see it. But yeah, it's people, if they don't like you, they'll fuck your livelihood up.
Yeah, they'll come for you.
I know where you are.
So that's why that's why you have to be independent. So like the thing is everybody likes the convenience of the system. So if you're gonna be dependent on the system, you kind of have to play by its rules. So if you don't like that, then you have to try to find a way to kind of do what you guys are doing, what I'm doing, find other outlets and learn ways where you can monetize that or whatever. So you're not as dependent on, an employer. And that's, the decentralization and, the other mechanism is privatization, like forming clubs and stuff. So it's like you're not technically in their commercial system, because once you're not technically in that commercial system, they don't have jurisdiction over you. And you can say whatever you want, you can sell to whoever you want to sell or trade, whatever you're doing in that system. But you got to actually turn that into a private organization before you do that,
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's lots of cogs, many wheels to turn, right?
Especially if like looks like you guys are into a lot of health stuff. Like if you were to, like in America, I don't know what it's like there, but like if you were to like put like the word like cures anything or just any like type of,
say that.
They would put you in jail. They would say, no, you can't say that that's a cure,
Yeah. Meanwhile, like there's cereal brands here that can put on their cereal lowers cholesterol, like for cereal, and you're like, what? We can't even say like reduces inflammation without being sued, which is actually like that's the medicine. It's not your brand cereal, but they can say whatever they want. There seems to be exemption. But
so the higher powers, right? Which is that hierarchy system.
You're looking at sorcery, like the very word pharmacy, the root of that, as you know from the book, is pharmakeia, sorcery through drug use and potions and all that shit.
Which is the symbolism, right?
It's dark.
About symbolism with the snake and the
yes,
it's dark. Yeah, like people want to think that like this is just like a casual, like this is not happening by accident. If somebody's watching this or listening to this, you're not dealing with like accidents. This is they're steering a ship in a certain direction, and they've been doing it for a long time. Because if it was just accidents, or if it was just like casual, they would at some point start making mistakes that would work in our favor. They wouldn't be so one-sided. And
and that's what I guess what I find fascinating is that these people at the top then tell a story to someone else, and then those people only know that part of the story, and then the next group are told a certain part of the story, right? And so, but it's only the people at the top that really know what is going on, and everyone else is like a minion underneath that, but playing into the story that they've been told, so playing their part.
But I love what you were talking about with the pharmaceuticals and the symbolism. Like that's not an accident, because you see that in so many different medical systems. Their symbolism is that same, like snake, like there's something slippery about it.
But ultimately, when that symbolism is originated, it was a good thing. It's a symbol of the sun, right? Helios. Speaking of what so we were just talking about like the origins of the words, right? So sometimes you have to because ultimately a lot of this comes back to the sun, because it is the cult of the sun. This is what a lot of people aren't really aware of. But what you'll see is like the word soleil, right? Soleil, right? But if you just look at that, break that up and put the end of that, which is the il, which means the in Italian, it's il sole. That is the sun. And so when you understand how these things, like the word, the root of the word heal, right? But also in your heel, H-E-E-L, but also H-E-L, helios, is the sun. Just like the word soul, S-O-L-E, means alone, because they called the sun God solus, the alone one, because it's by itself. But also S-O-L in Latin is the sun, but also S-O-U-L, that's the soul. But then S-O-L-E at the bottom of your foot, just like the heel, soul. So there is a lot of this harkens back to that. So in its pure form, the serpent isn't bad. In fact, if you look at the root serp, and this is another way to go in philology, this book 4 really gets into this. S-E-R-P, well, just how I told you the L and the R interchange. So then serp would become selp, but then the E and the A interchange. So then you'd have salp, and then the P and the V interchange. So you have salve. Now you have the root, same word, salvator, salvation, salvatore, right? Savior. And then you have serpent. Literally the same root dressed up differently with letters. And so like, this is why interchangeability of letters across different languages will help you decode everything. Like G might represent F, just as R and L interchange. And as we just said, F represents the aspirate H. For people who don't know who are in the audience, like an aspirate is like a letter that you put before a root. So like, just like if we took ant, A-N-T, well, you could put P in front of it and becomes pant. You know, or anytime you're dealing with a word, like for like oil, right? O-I-L. Well, knowing that the F and H interchange, you could put F in front of it and it becomes foil, like the foil, tin foil, but also foil to spoil someone's plans. But then if you put an H, it becomes hoil. And then that you'll see like this in like that, going back to that O-I being put together, it would look like this for you guys. So if you just like imagine I and the O and you put them together, it makes the lowercase a. That if you put those together, hoil becomes hal, which is the Doric halios, the Doric word for helios, another example of the sun. And so you'd have foist and hoist. And this is done in Spanish and Latin like crazy. They interchange the H and the F. For example, Spanish, you have hacer, meaning to do, but in Latin, it's facere. So it looks like the same word. In Spanish, it's H-A-C-E-R, but in Latin, it's going to be F-A-C-E-R-E, which also means to do. So you'll see like face, Boniface means do-gooder, or one who does good. And that's Pope. That's Pope Boniface, for those who don't know. So there's all kinds of things like this in the history of languages. Go ahead. Do you want to jump in?
No, I was just going to say, it's such a play on words, isn't it?
It's a system. And like if people didn't know this, they might dismiss it as coincidence. But once you start seeing the system, it becomes mathematically impossible to be a coincidence. And so also knowing like different words, like for example, like kara or karas in Hebrew, charas, it's going to be the sun. It's another name for sun, but it would look like if you spelled it out, just transliterated it, it would look like HRS or chet, resh, not shin. What's their other word for the other? They have a different word for they have 2 letters for the S's. I forget what the other one's called, but that's where the word like, so it looked like HRS, which is an abbreviation for hours. And that's where, but that's where the word Harris comes from, Charis. So people with the name Harris, you'll see Hari, right? Hare Krishna. It's all going to pertain to the Savior or the Son. And
My
then,
brother's name.
what's that?
That's my brother's name, Harry.
Harry? Yeah.
Is Harrison.
Harry Potter, the God, the Sun God, the Maker.
Yeah.
And so
Harrison,
ours.
but
Go
Harry.
ahead. Yeah.
Harrison.
And so that's because and so that HRS is also seen in Chris, right? Because you got to remember the H. So H, C, and CH and K, they're all interchangeable. So that HRS becomes CHRIS, Chris, which meant preserving, saving, as well as maker, artificer, because they're all assigned to the God because to the Son, because the Son is like the mediator between us and God, gives us life. God is a maker, he makes things, he creates. And so Chris in Chris, right? In Chris is the root of Christ, Christos, and it means good. So if you were to spell that in Greek, it would be Chi, Rho, Eta, Sigma. So it would look like CHRES, but so that would be Kres without the accent. So it would look like Krestos, CHRESTOS, but when you put the accent on the Eta, it becomes Chris. And that comes from Krishna, which means black. So this is why they wear black, because black is associated with good. And so good is God, right? It's the same word as seen in the Scandinavian languages. They say God morgen for good morning. And this is where the Christians took their name from, because it means good men or good fellows.
Do you think that then with naming a person, coming back to names and naming a baby, does that then, because they obviously have an intention behind it, and there's that, like when you're given your mantra, like there's that sacredness to it. Is there then, with the study of language, some sort of link between what a parent names a baby, and does that sort of set that intention for that child growing up and what character they have? Or is that just like, is a
In
name?
my opinion, I kind of piss a lot of people off. In my opinion, I don't think so. But maybe had you talked to me like 5 to 10 years ago, I might have been in that mindset. But I really have done, I've really done a lot of work on myself to get away from emotionalism and fatalism. And I know a lot of great, if you look, almost all of the great men throughout history, the leaders, whatever, they were fatalists. They really believed it was their destiny. And it gives you, in one way, it gives you an unbelievable amount of courage to do things you wouldn't have otherwise done. So it allows you to create or accomplish great feats. But then on the reverse, you can't correct your course because you believe it's God's will and you believe it's your fate. And so for me, that's so dangerous that I don't believe your destiny is going to be chosen by your parents naming you something. I feel like your destiny is going to be forged by the decisions you make and the consequences, those decisions and the choices you make in every moment. And you're not condemned by one bad decision. You know, it's like nobody's good or nobody's evil. It's a repeated pattern of behavior that eventually over time brings into manifestation consequences that are either favorable or unfavorable. But I think as a parent to at least do that, though, is to start the person off on the proper footing of having like that self-love and that like gift of feeling important and special. Because if you don't think that you are special or that you have that you can make an impact, that you can make a dent in the universe, then you don't have high self-esteem, and then you might not have high confidence, and that could lead to stuff down the road Whereas if you're a little kid and your parent is telling you, I named you this because of this, and this is what it means, and this is, you need to live up to, just give somebody something better to believe in. It helps with that. But just because you named your child something special doesn't mean that child's going to live up to that. So
Yeah,
it's just like it's a tool. It's a tool more than like a.
Chris might not be Christ.
Yeah.
Maybe the opposite.
And so before you said he being God, now is God a man? What's it?
How would I know? Actually, the times that I've had dreams and stuff like, so I don't remember my dreams, but every once in a while I have these like epic dreams where the whole thing plays out. Like it's like it's crazy. There's been times where I've interacted with an entity that is the creator, and it's always been a woman.
Mm.
And it was no different when
Well,
it was no,
Son, the Father,
was
the
no,
Holy Spirit, but they don't ever say that the Holy Spirit is actually the feminine. It's
no, because so what you have from that is the corrupt version that they can't even, they took the Trinity out of like the scriptures and all that stuff because of all the idolatry it caused in India. So like there's a whole story to that, but we can get into that after this. But the thing is this presentation I'm doing for you, or this stuff that I'm going over, I'm not going to do with anybody else. So I want to get through it so it has a unique draw to your podcast, especially down the, like, that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to make sure every time I go on someone's podcast, I have something that's unique for them, that it's going to drive traffic if anybody's curious about my work. So let's just continue, and we can get into the Trinity after this.
okay.
For sure. But so one of the other things like would be to explore etymologies and the origins of words. So like so just recapping, the first thing that you need to look at when you look at a word is the different definitions throughout history. But now you can start seeing, okay, let's play with it. Let's see where that word actually originated from, if it came from an older word or something else. And so it's important to know that not everything you see from an etymologist is going to be the truth. And sometimes it's just a scholar's best guess. And even though it's educated, it's just a guess. So this is why it's very important not to necessarily give authority away to somebody else.
Well, it's like an interpretation.
Say that again?
Is that like an interpretation then of what they assume that it is?
Well,
or is
you
that
can
lost
look
in
at
translation?
So some words, they're chartable, but some words, their origin is so hazy because people don't realize that that word is actually coming from, say, an older language like a Sanskrit or Tamil. They're using a root, even like the root of Jesus. Why is that name such a problem? Because it's an entire construct of the priest class. It's a Greek word with a Latin termination. Just like Christian is a Greek word, Chris, with a Latin termination, which means it's not an organic word. It was not developed, but it was a mystery school term. And the root of that word, Jesus, is the old name for Bacchus, the monogram for Bacchus, the sun. And that can be very controversial for people. But if you knew anything about Latin or Greek, you would see the problem with that right away, which automatically debunks the authenticity of the scriptures using those words, because no person speaking those languages would be using hodgepodge of names like that. And then they'll say, oh, well, his real name was Yeshua. Yeshua, just to play on the word Yasha, Savior, because he's the Son, the Savior, the Salvator, right? The serpent. And so going back to these words, I don't want to like burn your, like, I don't want you to get like religious people upset about you, but just for those who are religious, know that this, if you dive into my work, you're going to be exposed to all of it. And, but back to language, the third mechanism I would employ when you're looking at things is experiment with the phonics, right? The phonetics, the way things sound, to unlock and learn the language of the birds, because that's what it's called. It's also known as green language, because it ultimately goes back to, in some languages, like the ancient Irish, the Hebrew, these letters were originally named after leaves. And so what they did was, if you took a leaf, if you know which leaf corresponded to which letter, you could put those leaves on a string, tie them to a messenger, and have that messenger go to a priest in another town. He knows that secret lettered language of letters of the leaves of the trees, and he could see the order of those leaves and know how to read it, because he knows which leaf corresponds to which, like the elm tree corresponds to this, the maple leaf corresponds to this, elm leaf, I should say, like the birch leaf or whatever, bark, whatever they're going to do it, they can signify it to a letter. And if somebody were to get caught with it, nobody would know how to crack that code. So that's why it ultimately ties to green language, and it goes all the way back to China, where that's where you see, or Asia, where you see that like lotus symbolism. But you see it in Egypt too. You see it in India. It's all the same. Just it's the cult in different areas, but it does trace back to Asia, as far as we can see anyway. And so that would be the secret doctrine, the Kabbalah, and that's what that spirit in the word is, what you as somebody who's going to look at language can interact with. And nobody, once you know the ideas laid up in a word, it reveals a bunch of other things to you. So it's not just a word. And then the other thing would be like, going back to etymology, right? Just even the word government comes, if you know the Latin roots that are in that, gubernare, to control, mente, mind, mens, mente, mentis.
Wow.
So literally,
people just knew that. They might think twice about their government, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, like why would you could call it anything you want.
Yeah.
And it's a state of control, and it's controlling the mind. Yeah, it's literally mind control. And so understanding that, it's a serious thing you're dealing with. And so like the other thing would be like word splitting. So the art of finding concealed meanings in words, dividing them and rearranging them into a different sequence reveals the true meaning. And that's why legalese is like such a foreign language. And one of the hot topics you'll see in a lot of these spaces is people talking about the word understand, because when you rearrange it, it means stand under. So when a judge asks you if you understand the charges against you, they're not asking you if you're competent enough to comprehend the charges. They're asking you, do you stand under my authority of those charges? And it's basically a way of consenting through word magic
to
what he's about to do to you. Yeah. That's why you don't want to enter their system, and like you don't have to fight it. And so like I'm not one of those people that's like, mount up, patriots, we got to fight. No. You just need to unsubscribe. It's like a parasite, like doing a cleanse. Just stop feeding it what the hell it thrives off of, and it'll die. And
would actually. Yeah.
Because we're just not.
You don't need to be violent. Violent is not going to solve this problem.
It doesn't. We all just have to get out of the system.
Yeah.
Come back to communities again, creating our own communities within communities.
Or in that,
Self-sufficient.
defeat the presumption that the system has over you, so the system can go back to like some sort of sensical system where it's like common sense, it's just like, the system is just there to guarantee certain rights and settle certain disputes. Other than that, it's not there to be your babysitter. It's not there to like make sure you have a fair shake. We're all different. We're not equal. We have different skill sets, and we complement each other, right? We're better together than we are apart. But it's like, to sit here and just say this blank slate equality nonsense, we're not equal. No. And it's not a bad thing. And people are trying to make that seem like acknowledging reality is a bad thing, and it's not. That's what's gotten us in this situation, is we're all trying to like, sweep the truth under the rug and pretend to be things that we're not. And it's make believe, and it's a luxury that you have. Not you guys, but you know what I mean? Like a lot of these problems are just coming from a life of so much comfort that you actually have the luxury to bitch and whine and play fantasy all the time. Whereas if you look at our ancestors, not that long ago, they're friggin' in mines, and they don't even have electricity, mining stuff. They're logging, they're doing all kinds of like gritty professions because they didn't have all this abundance and this like fancy pants technology to do everything for them. They didn't have the ability to like turn every single thing into a financial instrument and trade it. And, you know, like, look at these people. They make money off of cryptocurrency, trading digital ether, you know.
It's trading thin air.
Yeah, trading contracts. They're just doing all this nonsense that is a total luxury of, and it's not even a luxury because it's actually hurting a lot of people, because those people are never gonna be able to work. Like, they're never gonna be able to do the work for anything else in their life because they got everything so easily, and that steals the reward of that journey from them, unfortunately. So it's a lot of hard lessons that are going to be learned.
And I think it's also too, but that's only sustainable to a point.
Yeah.
Until the inherent nature comes in and goes, no, you can't keep living like this.
And you
get
ladies, we're at that point.
Yeah,
we're at that point.
Yeah,
so
but I
come crashing down.
Because we did a podcast.
It's going to happen in our lifetime. It is going to happen in our lifetime. So we can either sit here and get mad that it's happening, or just realize it's happening, and let's minimize our exposure to it, you know?
But we did a podcast the other day with this guy, Asher Packerman. He's an Australian, and he was saying it was like we've totally just missed the point. Like, we went into lockdown for a reason, right? To come down. He goes, we're constantly just looking for ascension in the West. And he said, you know, ascension only gets you so far. We've actually got to come back down and be grounded within ourselves, so then that way we can do the work. And that's what lockdown was, but we really kind of missed the point, didn't we? Like, we've just gone back to the same way of living.
Yeah, back to that hustle and grind.
People just don't get it.
Well,
because we've had it too easy.
I think, well, this is some of the sorcery that's coming out of the East, right? Like, even the word Veda is another word for Buddha. The V and B interchange. So Veda becomes, and the U and E interchange becomes Buddha. So a lot of this is coming from the East, and that ascension stuff, it's getting you to like try to, like, let's say you believe in purpose and, you know, fate, whatever all that stuff is. At some point, I imagine you had some sort of conscious decision to come into this world. If not, you were thrown into it. But regardless, you're into it. We're here in the physical world. So why is everybody trying to ascend out of it and abrogate, you know, what the responsibility, why did you come here? And a lot of people don't even think about like what their purpose is. And that's one of the things that I feel like this is why everybody's going to be able to be replaced by either machines or otherwise, because you have no purpose. Not you guys, but like the average person has no. I say that all the time. I say you, but I'm not meaning you. I'm not. I just want to make sure I don't, you know, put any like burdens on you. No, I know, but just, I mean, just thinking about what you're saying with like the words and like being named a certain way, if it makes you behave. I don't want to accidentally like project something on you, but like people, like most people, if you talk to them and you ask them what their purpose is in life, what are they doing to make an impact? How are they impacting others? What problems are they solving? They're doing nothing. They're just cogs in a wheel. So it's like, if you can just be replaced by, if you're a cog in a wheel, you're going to be replaced by technology at some point. And the only way you get out of that is by purpose and doing something that makes you special, that makes you needed. You know, like even what I'm doing, it's not like a high demand job. I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy, but it's there. I'm having an impact. I'm talking to 2 ladies in Australia because of what I've done. You know, so if you make an impact, go ahead.
You are having an impact. You're creating awareness and curiosity for people to actually think a little deeper and expand their minds beyond their current reality.
And well, and what you guys are doing is having an impact on me and is it Angia? How do you say that?
Angia.
Yeah. So like, I love this is the stuff that I didn't learn about, like anatomy, health, all that shit is like the last thing. Like, look, I don't know if you can see it. I've saved like you see it? I've saved.
We were going to ask.
Why does that? I saved all this stuff because I think it's fucking interesting. And it's also helpful. Like, you
can only get pregnant.
You know, when you have a girlfriend and stuff, it's important to know this stuff. And, it's just because you know how to treat a woman based on where she is in her cycle, because she's not going to be the same. She's not going to be receptive to the same things based on where she is in her cycle. They've even proven this, like at the Kinsey Institute, like leading up to ovulation, that like 5-7 days before that, women, they make reckless purchases. They hook up with guys that they might not have otherwise hooked up with. There's all kinds of reckless behavior. And so if you know that about somebody, then you're going to be better at protecting them from situations if you're with them. Or if you know that about a girl, you know, like, you know, not to let her get taken advantage of, whatever, you know. So there's all kinds of things that matter that you guys are doing that work and teaching people about that stuff. I think that's really interesting. That's impactful, you know.
Because we're the seasons. We're just like nature. We have 4 seasons: winter, spring, which is ovulation, follicular, a luteal phase, which is autumn, and then our winter, which is menstruation. So we're just a representation of the Tao of nature, which is, I think, you know, we need to come back to that. We need to come back to that inherent nature, which that wisdom that exists within, that we've actually just lost. We've lost that. And we've lost that because
we're also on the male 24-hour cycle, which is not our inherent nature. We're meant to be on the monthly cycle, but in that 24-hour, because that's your circadian rhythm and that's men's clock. You run on a 24-hour cycle, but we're kind of.
I'm reading a book about the Darien Indian tribe. That's like in the Isthmus of America, like Panama, and they only reckoned time by the moon back then. But they even like their behavior was different. The whole tribe, they weren't like other Indians. They were fast at night. Like when the moonlight was there, they were like as nimble as other Indians during the daytime. But then at other parts of the cycle, when there's like a new moon, there's no moonlight, they weren't as like active. And during the daytime, they weren't as active. There's a lot to that. And that's kind of like in the healthy sense of all this occult symbolism, that's what's at the root of it, is it's encoding nature and the cycles. And we are microcosms of nature, our creator. Whatever that creator is, I can't tell you, but if somebody's watching this and they're not unsure, or they're an atheist or whatever, I would ask you this: what is the pressure of the air you breathe at sea level? That's going to be about 14.7 or 0.8 pounds per square inch. How do you have gas pressure without the necessary antecedent of containment? You don't. That means there's a container somewhere out there. Otherwise, we wouldn't have gas pressure. All of the air we breathe would just be going off and filling the available volume. That is the vacuum of space, and we'd all be dead. That's not happening. You're in a creation, whether you like it or not. And I'm not telling people what they have to believe God is or whatever it is. But if you can't recognize that you're in creation, you're up shit's creek without a paddle. It's not a good place to be. So if there's people watching that, don't take pride in if you don't believe in a creator, or if you don't have the common sense to recognize that we are all part of a creation, because we are.
Absolutely, we are.
I know.
And you know what? And this is perfect, because another, like, one of the things with language that is to look at is also anagrams. So we're talking about earth, right? Well, if you ladies know this, but like if you just rearrange that, earth becomes heart. It's the same word.
Mother Earth.
And sometimes,
Earth,
and
the
so
heart, the pulse, the life force, the chi,
the prana,
and even the heart chakra,
it's
going to be
green.
Nature produces that green and that abundance.
Yeah.
And so, like, another way is, like, if you look at things in reverse, like sometimes a word will be written, like a name of somebody will be written in Hebrew, but you'll pronounce it like in English from left to right, but its secret is in reading it like Hebrew from right to left. And so that a good example would be like Rome's first king, which is named Numa. But if you read it like Hebrew, so that would be in Latin, it would be N-U-M-A. But if you read it like Hebrew, it's Amun. Amun is the sun. Jupiter Amun. Zeus Amun. God the Father, right? Jesus the Amen. The E and U are interchangeable, recall that. So Amun and the Amen are the exact same words, just like Veda and Buddha. And so I did a great podcast recently for those who want to see with Pat Life. And it's basically showing how, in that I demonstrate how the first 300 years of Rome is nothing more than astrotheology. And so Rome's history ultimately ties into Sanskrit and the Indians, whatever whether they're actually from India or the system was just taken there and the people in Europe were initiated into it and then they started ruling on behalf of that cult. But there's a system that the Indians used called Themeru, and it means changing. And it's basically an anagrammatical way that the tribe of Yudi wrote words. And that's according to Encyclopedia Britannica. That's not even me. And the Yudi would be from Ayodhya in India. And that's where Yudi, Jew, you, that's where all that stuff comes from. It's all the same word. And so if you were to look at the Italian name for Rome, you would see Roma. But if you read it like Hebrew, it's Amor. So Roma is Rama, Brahma, Abram, the Most High, but it's also Amor, love. That's God is love. And so for those who want to dive more into that, check out A Godsacre for Winds of the Soul. It's my latest book. But you can do that. You can also just do that with, like, if you look at the word ears, right? If you just move the S to the front of the word, it becomes sear, which is like to burn or char the surface of something, or to mark with a branding iron. But like phonetically, seer is also a seer, a prophet, a person blessed with profound moral and spiritual insight, one who sees. That's where Veda is also connected to that. Vates, all that, because that's where Vatican comes from, the Vates, the seers. And so those are the prophets, those who prophesies the future. And so you can even see that in the word prophet. It's prophet, a seer, but then there's prophet, like is something profitable? Will your life as a prophet be profitable? Do you have eyes to see?
Right. It's fascinating.
Yeah. And so we talked about homonyms, which are like two or more words that have the same spelling or sound, yet convey different meanings. We did that with like the soul, the heel, the hell, heli, helios, all that stuff. Like, we have stairs that we walk up, but we also stare at people. We have hair as on our head, but we also have hair as in a rabbit. It's another symbol. The rabbit in spring, the Hare Krishna, right? The sun in spring. Just like the sun goes up and down, the rabbit hops up and down. You have like through as in we go through something, but then you have through as I threw an object. One of the things that's like not as common is something called acrostics. And so those are poems or compositions in which certain letters from a word form a word that would likely remain hidden from those without the wherewithal to see it. And so like when you look at the Piscean age that Christianity was a product of, it was a failure in terms of the religious symbolism because the people just didn't take to the fish-themed deities as much. But it was successful for currency, banking, jurisdiction of the civilized world through the use of maritime admiralty law, which is the law of the sea in all of our courts, right? So prior to that, there was the age of Aries. So you had the Lamb of God, the Agnus Dei. And that's where the ram, the Rama, Aries in Latin, what we say Aries, that means ram. That was successful in terms of like people didn't want to give that up, but there was something that you can see that the priest created called the ichthys. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of this. It's spelled ICHTHYS for those who want to research it. And it's a symbol of a fish. And so that was a word given to Jesus Christ. And the fish, it looks like the womb or the yoni. It's like the vesica piscis. And you'll see like Mary, she'll be a statue in that womb, that matrix, that navel. Anyhow, the acrostic would be like, if you were to take that word in Greek, it would look like I can't do this. I have to spell it in Greek. Iota, chi, which kind of looks like an X, theta, which is a TH, upsilon, which looks like a capital Y in all capital letters, or a lowercase would look like a U, and then sigma, which kind of looks like an E when it's capitalized. If you were to take the first letter in each one of those Greek letters, it also stands for something. So you would have the Christians, they would call themselves Pishikuli, which is the little fish, Pish and Bish and Vish, like Vishnu, who takes the form of a fish, is also Pish, as in Pisces, because the V and the P interchange, but also fish. The PS, the SC in Latin is like an SH in English. So it's not Pisces, it's Pisces, right? So Vesica Pisces, Pisces, or whatever. They call themselves, and it's ultimately where you see in Episcopal, you also see it in Bishop. And so that acrostic would be, it would look from the top down, be iota, which stands for ichthys, which is a fish, or Pisces, right? Pisces. Then you'd have Jesus, which is I, again, iota, because it's spelled, Jesus in Greek is spelled with an I, because they didn't have J's back then. And then you would have Christos, which is spelled with a chi, which is, it's in Greek it's a ch, but it looks like an X in our language. Then Christos or Christos is Christus or Christ. Then you have Theo, which is God or day in Latin. So that would be with the theta. And then the upsilon would be Huios, which means son. In Latin it would be Filius. And then you would have Salvator, which is Savior. Sotor. So that's what that sigma at the end of it stands for. So ultimately, if you look at it, it's really hard to explain this. So for the audience, just type up,
Savior, right?
just type up ichthys, ICHTYS, on Google Images and go through it, and then you'll see that. But the reason this is so significant is because a lot of this comes from the Indian culture, and the Tamils, some of their mystical texts were written acrostically, just like that, and enigmatically, and admitted even by the natives that each verse could be translated 5 different ways.
Wow.
So this is why it's really difficult when you're looking at a scriptural text. You have to know you're dealing with a system of word magic that's encoding a bunch of meanings that the priests themselves know. But if you're not initiated, you're not going to be able to figure it out unless you have a key. And so I try to give people as much of a key as I can. And then to wrap it all up, there's numerology. So every alphabet, when you trace languages as far back, you'll see, like I'm reading about studying like China and like ancient, the Chinese culture and stuff. The further back you go, there was a time where their language was numerical. So everybody across Asia that was in contact with the Chinese Empire, they could all understand the same text, but they couldn't understand each other in speaking because their text was like sheet music or like Morse code. Like they knew what everything meant in their language. They just couldn't understand each other when they speak. But if you and I speaking different languages know what certain numbers correspond to in certain arrangements in our own language, we can understand each other through that. And so this is how they used to name deities. And you'll see like Fri or Frey, which in Egypt is the sun. You'll see that encoded in Freya to the Norse traditions, another aspect of the sun, but also Frigga. Doesn't matter how you get there, it's the same entity philologically and etymologically. But if you were to look at Frey in Greek, it would be Phi, Rho, Eta, which would look like the Phi kind of looks like a circle with an I through it. The Rho looks like a P, and then the Eta looks like an H. But when you understand the numerical value of these characters, they add up to 608. Just like that monogram of Jesus, which used to be for Bacchus. For the Roman, in its Greek, it was upsilon eta sigma, which also equals 608. So you're looking at 608, which is a cycle of the old Neros, and those entities correspond to that cycle that's made by the sun every 608 years. That's what they thought at the time. It was later proved that that was not right, but they believed it when they created these archetypes. And then the Romans confused the upsilon and the iota, so it became IHS instead of YHS. And that's where the Jesuits get their logo, IHS. And you'll see that IHS in the middle of a blazing sun. clearly the sun. And for anybody who doesn't believe me, just look up the Jesuits logo. You'll see it in the art. You'll see it in all their symbolism. So that's why numbers matter so much too.
Right. Talk to us then about the significance of the sun in all of these. In
Well,
all of
so
these ancient cultures, in terms of, so is it, I mean, because it feels like we are living, even though it's 2022, we're really living in a mythological time.
even corona is another word. Crown, core, corona. It's all related to the sun.
Coronation.
Yeah. Yeah. So this is a system. It's the reason they're the solar cult, because you have to, a lot of people don't appreciate this because we live in a technological era where we haven't had to actually rely on nature to chart our progress in anything in life.
Have we made progress?
And yeah.
I think it's de-evolution, devolution.
Yeah. Well, think about it this way.
The demise.
The reason the sun is the savior is because without it, you would be in eternal darkness. So every day the sun dies and is resurrected.
Yeah, it's guaranteed.
Every autumn, the sun is crucified on the equinox or crosses over and dies. That's why Mary is at the foot of the cross as Jesus is being crucified, because Jesus is crossing into Libra, the sun, leaving Virgo, and Virgin Mary is Virgo. And so the reason you'll see a lot of this symbolism corresponds to when they reckon the year. So if you know what culture you're dealing with and what time of the year they reckoned the end and beginning, you can understand their astrotheological symbolism. For example, on the winter solstice, as soon as the sun rises a degree and the days go back to start like increasing by like 4 minutes each day or whatever it is, that happens on the 25th. Well, that is the first day of, that's in the sign of Capricorn, the manger of the goat. Capri, goat, corn, seed. So at midnight, when the symbolism was formed, it's a little bit after now because of the precession, but you can still see the same drama passing up. In the east, after midnight, you would see the star of the east, which would be Vindemiatrix, which means great harvestress. It's in Virgo. So she would be Lord of the Ascendant at midnight. And then as the night goes on, right before dawn, you'll see Virgo ruling the night sky at the midheaven as the sun is born from her side, from the manger of a goat in Capricorn, of a virgin, immaculate conception. So this is all encoding a story, right? And so Mercury and Buddha's mother, Maya, Adonis's mother, Mira, Jesus's mother, Mary. The Latin word for the sea is mare. That's where Mary comes from. It's all pertaining to the sea. You'll see this in everything. And you'll see it in like the rape of Persephone in Greek mythology. You'll see it in the stealing of Helen, right? Eleni, it's the virgin of the sky. And so all of this is not historical, but they've taught us that it is historical, and they've retarded us. And if you look at all these religious orders, whether it's an Abrahamic one, going back to India, it doesn't matter. These people derive their authority, especially like if you look in the Muslim world, they're predicated on being descendants of Japheth, one of Noah's son. But if you know there was no Noah, if you know that story is an allegory, right? All that flood symbolism pertains to Capricorn, the rainy season, the gate of deluge. They took this from the Chaldees. They took their literal astronomical allegories, converted them into history and claimed it as their own history, and then used that as a divine right of kings to rule you. That's what you're seeing in this world. Just like people who couldn't claim to be Semites, that's predicated on being a descendant of Shem, Noah's son. But if you know there was no such thing as Noah, thus no such thing as Shem, you know there's no such thing as a Shemite or Semite, thus there is no such thing as an anti-Semite. These are little tricks that people are using to stay in victim status when you call them out on their atrocities and their spiritual wickedness. And this is the real problem with religion. And that's the real reason I do my work, is to help people defeat the presumption, because until we defeat the presumption that all these people have over us, we are going to keep doing their bidding, and their bidding is not good. Their bidding
It goes
is
through
bloodshed.
It goes through the deluge,
Yeah.
the great floods.
Yeah. So that's, and so like when you look at Noah's three sons, if you look at their names, this is why it's important. You're gonna see Ham, blackness, darkness. He pertains to winter. Japheth pertains to spring. Shem pertains to summer and autumn, because back then the year was broken into three parts. Autumn and summer were part of the same month. And so you'll see this in allegories too. You like when you see statues of the lion body with the virgin head, that's literally the power of the summer months, right? It's the sun in Leo and Virgo. That's when the sun is, the wrath of God is at its most prominent, if you will. And then you'll see like death. That's constantly like the sun in winter, right? Like if you look at the four horsemen of the apocalypse, they pertain to the seasons. So it's not literal. It's not literal. And that's the problem, is everybody's like, they literally are like it's cool to use it if it helps you, right? Like some people's favorite book is like Lord of the Rings, and there's all these amazing allegories that help them live their life and learn lessons, and it's beautiful. But the problem becomes when you start telling people that Lord of the Rings is a historical account.
Yeah.
So the Bible, all that stuff, it's amazing. There's profound truth in it, but it's not historical. It's not literal.
No, it's mythology. It's stories.
Yeah,
Someone's
that's all it is.
interpretation of the
Yeah.
truth. Yeah.
Which is then used as a form of control to keep us where we're at right now, to keep humanity for benefit of these, whatever you want to call it, whoever's behind, the masterminds behind it all.
Well, if you want, I can go straight into the Trinity and get to the sun symbolism the way you know, this is a controversial thing, but I prepared to do it for you guys if you want it, but it's up to you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, so when this,
okay,
going back to this,
we've got half an hour. I think, we've got half an hour.
Yeah, we can do this in like, I'll do this really fast, and then, you know, we can just talk about whatever you guys want to talk about. I'll burn through this. But going back to, so this is like the ultimate fight, the good and evil, the light and darkness, winter and summer. So when this first started, they noticed that the sun was like the creator. In springtime, everything comes to life, you know, blooms. But then also in winter, when the sun goes into winter, depending on what part of the year you are, obviously, it destroys everything. So at first there was only like those two archetypes. But when you look at it from a greater perspective, it's revealed that destruction is a necessary part of its reproduction and regeneration. And thus its third part of power would be preserving the creation. And so when you preserve something, you're saving it. So that's why the sun is the savior of mankind, right? It brings vegetation to life in one half of the year and then kills it in the other half. And this is the origin of the Trimurti in India, or Trinity. And so they would use Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva. And the Persians use Oromasdes, Mithra, the mediator, and Arimanes. And then the Egyptians used Osiris, Nath, and Typhon. But they're all three in one. They're not separate. Trimurti means one God, three forms. You see this in a podcast I just did where I did Troy. That's what Troy means. Troya, three in one.
So
and
it's
so,
like creation, maintenance, destruction, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, because without that, it's like that, the yin and yang, the change card. There's only one. The change is what that constant change is the mechanism that preserves the system. If it didn't have that, it wouldn't keep continuing. So that I'm not saying this is how reality works. I'm just saying this is the symbolism of like how they formed it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Keep going. Yeah.
So then prior to like the Christian era, the Greek had the hypostases, and what each hypostasis was also a form of only one being. And there's nothing wrong with Christianity using this symbolism in the thought process, but the wrong that Christianity commits is that it lies and deceives its believers about what it is. It steals that triune God from the mystery cults and then denies that the Son is the Trinity, despite the fact that Elohim literally is plural, right? It's actually Alaim, Al being an old name for the Son, E being the God. So Al would be God, Ale would be goddess, and then you add the I am in Hebrew at the end of that. that would be plural. So it literally translates goddesses, and they translate it as God. Well, why would you do that if you weren't concealing, if you weren't sneaky and up to something? There's not one person who speaks Hebrew who will tell you a word terminating in I am doesn't mean plural. And so Jesus is one aspect of that, the Trinity, and that would be the creator, preserver, and destroyer. But what they did, so the Trinity encodes those three major aspects of that son: creator, preserver, destroyer, or savior, destroyer. The Father, which would be the creator, the Son, who is the savior, Salvator, and then there would be like the Eva principle, or the destroyer, or the devil, or Shiva, right? Now, the Christian monks, whether through ignorance or deception, they created 4 characters of the Trinity, but only speak of the 3 as part of it. So they say the Father, Son, and Holy Ghost, as you were mentioning, but that's because they divided that destroyer character. They separated that and the regenerator. So now that ought to be 1. Now it's 2 characters. It's the Holy Ghost and the devil. So if it wasn't done through ignorance, I imagine that it was done to match the 4 seasons or the cardinal point of the year. So that change came after they turned it into 4 seasons as opposed to 3. And so that Son is that S-O-N is also the S-U-N. And it's the preserver or the mediator. And that's what Mithra means. And that's where a lot of this comes from. And so going back to that Alaim, let me just spell that in Hebrew for your audience. It would be Aleph, Lamed, He, Yud, Mem, Sophie. And so that would translate or transliterate as A-L-E-I-M, but they transliterate it as E-L-O-H-I-M. And that's disingenuous. And even though older versions of like the Hebrew scholars, they'll admit that. Now, go ahead. You want to jump in? Feel free to jump in.
No, we're just.
Or I'll keep going if you want. I'll keep going.
Taking it in.
I just don't want you to feel like
You
I'm
do
not.
it so well. I mean, your translation of being able to actually, articulate that is just.
Well, that's obviously your genius. Like that's your gift.
Phenom.
Thank you. No, I'm not a genius. I've just done the work. That's all it is. And if as you do the work, you'll get better at it, and then it's not as impressive. And the goal for me is to get as many people being able to do this so that everybody can just start standing up. But right now, people don't have the confidence to stand up because it's kind of like how all the scientists put on these lab coats and we're like, I'm an authority. You can't, you got to listen to us. And that's what the priests do. And they're one and the same when you look at them. But that Christian Trinity, I remember I said that it doesn't actually have the word Trinity anywhere in the Bible, but it was included under that guise of Alaim. Also, you would have Rashit, which they say is Rashit. That's erroneously transliterated as R-E-S-H-I-T, but if you were to spell it in Hebrew, it would be Resh, Aleph, Shin, Yud, Tav. And that would, in English, that would look like R-A-S-I-T. And that would be the first emanation or eon. And that, what is meant by that is wisdom or logos, because Rashid, it had that root Raz, you'll see that in Rajaput, you'll see that in Rashid, like Allah Rashid, the righteous. And in Greek, it is called Arche. It pertains to top or head. And so that would be the logos or wisdom, right? So it doesn't say like in the beginning God created. It says by wisdom, Bereshit. Goddesses literally formed. And that is a huge deal because when you start seeing wisdom, well, now you're talking about the doctrination of the doctrine of wisdom. Now you're talking about Kabbalah. Now you're talking about the Persian cult. And now you're seeing what the Bible is really from. And that's why nobody can expose each other, even though they all have the goods on each other, because at the end, you'll see they're the same friggin' cult. So nobody can pull the plug.
Yeah.
And so then you'd have the spirit, which is Ruach. That's the second emanation or the second mind. And so together you have Alaim, Rasit, and Ruach. And those are the 3 forms of one God, the Trinity. And the Trinity is concealed in the Bible because, like I was saying, it caused a shitload of idolatry in the Orient. Now, according to the Targums and Maimonides, Rashid is wisdom. This is not me. I'm not an authority, but you can see in the language, once it's there, nobody can hide it from you. Origen, Jerome, Epiphanius, none of the early Christian fathers, not a one of them knew anything about the Targums, particularly Jerome and Origen. And what that indicates and what I expose in my work is that Hebrew is a product of the modern era, right? The earliest Greek writer to mention Moses was Cassius Longinus, and that was in the second half of the 3rd century.
What
So you mean to tell me not
there? What I find fascinating is essentially it's just men's business.
yeah, lie, cheat, and steal.
It was goddesses, right? Where does it actually fully originate from?
Well, because there's this schism. There's this schism in the early, there was like religious wars and shit in like India over like the linga, which would be the masculine phallus. And that's what you see, that obelisk everywhere, and the yoni. Yeah. So there was a schism. That's what caused a lot of this migration to Europe. And they brought all their trash to the Western world. And that's where they took all that feudalism shit, monarchies did not exist. Feudalism did not exist in Europe prior to all these religious cults and shit coming from Asia. So that's why this stuff is important, is because this is not a natural way of life to live, where a caste system where a priest class controls everything, then they're kings.
Because there's been destruction. Yeah, there's been complete destruction, where I think it's like the sacred texts have been abused and taken to power to create.
And not only that, I was reading something from the British Empire. When they got to India, they found out, because of the climate there, all of their sacred texts had to be copied every 10 years because the paper and shit would rot. So you're now relying on those schemy friggin' priests to retranslate everything or redo everything every 10 years. Wow. And of course they're going to make, they're going to do things as they see it, versus translating it as it was.
Because what's really interesting, what we learn in Vedic meditation is that the knowledge never gets written down. The knowledge is passed down from the gurus rather than
even that's
written.
Even that's a problem though, right? Because you could play the game of telephone with any of the knowledge that I've gone over today, and I guarantee after like the 5th person, they would be fucking it up.
Yeah,
but it's true that is how they do stuff. I'm not denying that it is. A lot of it is oral. A lot of it's through.
Corrupted. It's been corrupted
It's all been corrupted
reasons. Yeah, but it's taken us away from nature. Yeah, which is what.
Right,
yeah.
You just said it. If you can get past the corruption and just go back to seeing how the systems correspond to nature, then you can get the system in its pure form and don't worry about it. The problem is they're using that system. Yes, applying it to history and like war, and they're using it for business rather than they had to create these systems because in the old days you couldn't record things. So how would you remember everything you learned about nature? Well, you'd have to make a story about it. That's why they would do songs. And another reason they would do songs is if you have the song, once you know that song, it's hard to change that song. Otherwise it doesn't sound right. If you mix up the words, the music isn't going to apply, and then you'll know, we're getting something wrong here. Something's not right about this song or this poem. That's the other reason for it.
Uni verse. It's a verse. It's a verse of the universe, right?
Or is it the Yoni verse?
Yeah. Which is womb, which has the word om.
Yeah.
And om.
That's what matrix means in Latin.
Sound of the universe of creation, which is then
one verse.
One verse. Yeah.
And so you'll see in Christian, going back to, because women carry eggs in them. So, so it's like, you'll see Christian artwork depicting figures holding that Orphic egg. And that's because Orpheus, even though he's not a real figure, that's who is attributed to bringing that knowledge of the triform deity to Greece. And then that's through the Greeks, because Christianity comes from the Greeks. A lot of people don't understand that. They're the ones that created that word Christos from the Hellenic world. So all of the early Christian fathers, they were all members of the mystery cults in Egypt and Greek. You know, you got to remember Athens is just a colony of Egypt. And so just to close out in this, on the history of Orpheus, a gentleman named Payne Wright wrote, "The history of Orpheus is so confused and obscured by fable that it is impossible to obtain any certain information concerning him." Now, he appears to have been a Thracian and to have introduced his philosophy and religion into Greece, namely plurality of worlds and the true solar system. Nor could he have gained this knowledge from any people which history has preserved any memorial. For we know none among whom science had made such a progress, that a truth so remote from common observation and so contradictory to the evidence of unimproved sense would not have been rejected, as it was by all sects of Greek philosophers, except the Pythagoreans, and that's Pythagoras, who rather revered it as an article of faith than understood it as a discovery of science. Now, I would just like to remind people, going back to what I was saying, Cassius Longinus, the first, not one person in the Greek world mentioned Moses until the Common Era. So you have to rely on a Jew for their ancient history, just like you'd have to rely on the Indians for their ancient history. Well, what did these priest class do? They're always trying to make themselves look older than they are, so that you give them authority. The Jews never were a cultural people. It's all from the modern era. And for people who aren't familiar with this, Hebrew is a modern language. It was introduced in the Middle Ages. Prior to that, that system, it's an old system, it's a priestly system. But prior to that, it wasn't spoken by any culture. That's why they had to invent the vowel point system, so you know how to pronounce certain words, because they don't have vowels. And if you look at how do you know somebody existed in this world? Well, we're human beings and we have trinkets and mementos. We leave behind jewelry, we leave behind letters, clothing, you name it. All kind work, craftsmanship work, we maybe built something, whatever. Pythagoras, Socrates, Jesus, Muhammad. Do you know how many combined works those four men left behind?
How many?
None.
Nothing.
Oh.
Not only that, there is not one artifact from anybody in the areas that they were said to preach. Nothing. They didn't have any hand in writing the scriptures. So everybody's saying, well, Jesus said this, Muhammad said this. No, you believe a story about those guys. So even if they were real, what you're reading has nothing to do with them. And this is the problem. This is how serious the situation we're in, is because you're looking at billions of people will go to their death to preserve this system. So they pretend that they don't want to be slaves, while simultaneously and maybe unconsciously defending the system.
Like we still celebrate Christmas and Easter, like the death and the birth of someone who,
Well,
you know, like
the sun is rising though. That's the so if you're initiated
and exists within the godly system within. So
if you know that Jesus, if you know that Jesus is the sun, then yes, the sun does die and rise on the equinox.
Yeah.
And then it does pass over the spring equinox. Oh, sorry, on the sol. It rises on the winter solstice, right? It dies on the autumn equinox. It rises over, it crosses over, it passes over. That's actually the etymology of the word Hebrew, those who have passed over, because they are masons, they are priests. They have passed beyond the Hebraic degrees, if you will. And so to pass over, it's kind of like an analogy of the sun rising, passing over the vernal equinox. So if you know that these archetypes are the sun, then
the sun.
Yes, Jesus Christ is my Lord and Savior. The Son is my Savior.
Yeah, Syria.
I just don't look at it like the uneducated. It's just a different system. And if you read the works of the early Christian founders, they will tell you all of this stuff. It's all there. But the problem is people are not familiar with language. And so they're not going to look into anything that's not English, because that's what's happening now, is because of these empires, everybody is speaking English now. and nobody's really taking, because they don't need to speak other languages, nobody learns other languages unless it's like a passion. It's very rare that people learn other languages, and that's a product of this technological era. You go back like 100 years, people were learning Greek, Latin, English, German, French, all these, you know what I mean? But the more, I can promise people, the more you learn, the more you will see that they are actually all the same language, sharing the same alphabet, just dressed up differently. So it's just the beginning part of the journey that's hard to get over. Once in, just requires like 20 minutes on each alphabet of serious study so you can learn how each letter transliterates into your own native language. Once you've got that, then you can start reading it. And it becomes a lot easier. So that's what I would encourage people to do.
Cool. Yeah. Okay. Get into the etymology.
Yeah.
And people.
So now you guys can teach me about something for the last couple minutes, whatever you want. What do you want? What do you want an American to know? American male, a toxic male.
Toxic masculinity.
Yeah.
I actually want to know myself, because we spoke into the different astrological wonders of the world. Personally, I don't know if you would know, but do you know your star sign and like your? Because I know.
Yeah, I'm the first. I'm in the first degree of Leo.
Okay.
That's my sun sign.
Do you know your rising and moon?
Yes, Aries rising, and my moon's in Capricorn.
Oh, same. Capricorn moon. Fire. Do you know the rest of your chart? What's in, like, what your Mercury is, your Venus?
Yeah, well, Mercury's pretty much always going to be where the sun is. Yeah, because it's only like 20. It's really close to the sun. So yeah, my Mercury is in Leo.
Yeah.
So that's like one of the bad aspects of my chart. And then Venus, I believe, is in Virgo for me. Saturn is in Libra. Jupiter is in Sagittarius. So Saturn's exalting in mine, and Jupiter is in his home sign. And then Mars is in Cancer for me, which is, they say, is kind of like a bad one because he's in fall, but he's still over a water sign, and Mars is the only planet that is happy in all of the Mare signs, the water signs.
My Mars is in Cancer too. There you go.
Oh, same.
All of you?
No.
Oh.
No. Just, do you know what your Mars is in?
No idea.
Okay, great.
I have to go back.
So like for me, so this is what I would say. Like, so I think astrology is important because if we're in a creation, these things have to have an effect on us.
Yeah, totally.
But I don't believe our fate is going to be determined by the sign. I look at the astrology just like the weather. Yeah. So it's like if you know, like, planting a seed in, certain parts of the year is not going to work. Just like, so maybe doing certain activities is not going to be favorable if these aspects, you know what I mean? So
yeah,
I don't ignore astrology, but I don't think your life is going to be like you're not going to be a victim of your astrological things. No,
because that's such a dangerous concept, and it's not like taking this as Bible, but just a nice little further insight into who you are, how you communicate, how you process thought, like show and receive love. But yeah, like you said, and I think that's like with anything, don't take it as gospel, don't live by that or think like that fatalist kind of mindset. This is my destiny.
And that's my problem. Like in book 1, I was very much in that mindset. So like you can see how like I've changed as a person in my journey. Once you get to like book 3, I've pretty much left all of the controversial, sensational stuff, and book 3 focused more on the symbolism and mythology. And book 4, everybody's saying book 4 is their favorite right now, but it's because it builds off the other knowledge. So it's like, if you didn't have that original knowledge, if you didn't see how bad the world was, then you might not appreciate what you're dealing with. So it's like important to recognize it. But once you know it, you're like, all right, I don't need to focus on all the bad stuff anymore. I can now focus on the beauty. I know what the system is. I know how to avoid it. I know what the unhealthy foods are. I know how to avoid them. It's like that.
Yeah.
And then life, I've been like at the end of, so like my life was like falling apart in 2020, like because of the stuff, because I was living in Los Angeles. So I lost my jobs, like everything. And then, so I published book 3. And then a gentleman named Chance Garton, who does Interverse podcasts, he got my books and recommended me to Crow 777, who he might be someone fun for you to have on, Crow or Chance. They're both really good at this stuff. Crow has a big audience because he's the guy who discovered the lunar wave. And so he brought me on his show, and that like popped my sales so much that like I didn't have to get a job. So like I've been writing full time since then. And I got out of Los Angeles, and now I'm like, I'll tell you guys off camera once the thing's over, but now I'm in a place where there has not been masks. There has not been roll up your sleevers. There's nothing. Everybody's been normal. There's a middle class. It's just like, it has an effect. So there's parts of, that's why everybody hates on America, is because outside of the cities, America is still free as hell. There's not a lot of police because there's not a lot of people. It's just in the cities where America is really going to shit. But if you get out to like the rural areas, morality is still high. Families are still, thriving. It's beautiful. There's a lot of wilderness, nature. Like it's really amazing. And, I hope you guys, I feel really bad for you guys down in, I hope it's something like that in Australia, but I have friends in Australia who are like, man, they're recommending the 4th roll up your sleeve. Like, it's just like getting worse and worse. So I know people that are like fleeing, but
where we
I'm praying, hopefully.
We're in the city.
We're in Melbourne, which we were the most locked down city in the world. Like we had it hard. We had curfews, we had police, and the government regulating mask wearing and all.
How do you keep your sanity? Like, how do you keep your, how do you not go like postal and like flip out? Like, how's everybody taking it?
See, that's the thing. They don't.
Did you?
Most of the time. Like, this is the issue.
Oh, Australia is literally, Melbourne is, people are so compliant. It's like they've lost the ability to be able to actually think for themselves, which is really alarming, which just, perpetuates the whole system.
Majority is they've done a really great job to save us from this virus.
From the crown.
From the literal corona. Like it's multi-level, multifaceted.
Yeah.
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 God save the corona.
Cheers to that, listeners.
Yeah, well, at some point it's got to break at some point, right? Like,
yeah.
I mean, it's like, don't you think at some point like your countrymen are going to be like, we have made a fool of ourselves because we believe this shit? Like, there's no humility at all in these people. They still think it's like.
I think there's some awakening. I think because the measures were so drastic, and I think that the control and the grip on us got so drastic and got so extreme that I think it did send people to that brink of, hang on, why? And then also for people when they did get the virus, I think realizing, well, it wasn't that bad. Like, why did you do all of this?
But then there's just even the forgetting. It's like people forget that they've been locked down for 2 years and just carry on like nothing's happened, which I just find totally bizarre. But it's like, you take away people's base chakra, their roots, right, which connects to the emotion of fear. And so you put people into fear, and then you take away their finances, their security. It's like they're easily manipulated. Right?
That's why you need to, like, not you. I'm doing this again.
Why people?
I always want to say that's why you need to do this. That's why that's why people need to unplug from, like, if you don't watch the media.
Yeah.
There's nothing to take you from crisis to crisis to crisis to crisis. And that's what they're doing. It's like one thing ends and they've got another lined up. So you never get a break. If you're like
monkeypox. I mean, that is just that.
They're already making the.
Oh my God. It's just, I mean, that
it's the money pox.
Yeah. That's right.
Yeah. Oh my God.
Well, thank you.
Oh my gosh, I know. Thank you for the amazing chat.
Yeah.
I'm really excited to go
Yeah, it's
back.
my pleasure. Thank you for having me on, and I look forward to seeing it. I'll whenever it goes up, just let me know. I'll start like doing like little clips and stuff, and just like dripping it on my YouTube to try to guide people to your site or wherever you're playing.
And for those listening, like, how can they connect with you? Where can they find you?
So the best way to keep up to date with me would be at my YouTube. It's just my name, Dylan Sicoscio. I'm not really like trying to be like available to people. I just do it. I do this for you because we follow each other on Twitter. You know, it's a mutual exchange of value. You guys have supported my work. Most people want me to just come on and give them an entertaining show, but they've actually never even like read my books. So the fact that you guys read my books, I really appreciate that. And YouTube is the best there. And I have like a playlist on my YouTube. So for people who want to view at least the first hour or so of every podcast I've ever done, that's like not behind a paywall, they can do that on my YouTube. There's like 14 videos. And then some of them are just free that I've done with other people. They just put the whole 3 hours for free or whatever. So there's a lot of value in that content. And you know, hopefully people do that. And if they see value, they buy the books. And if not, that's okay too. Maybe they just share it and gets my work out there some way. But yeah, that's probably the best way. And my books, my series, there's SpiritWhirled. There's The Tale of Onora, Onora. And then there's another book I published this year called Get Mad or Get Realistic. You might want to recommend that for like all the men. All the men.
And then I had to put it down.
Yeah. That's for men who are trying to adjust to the sexual marketplace these days, because now it's a global sexual marketplace and our biology is not equipped to handle what's going on. And so women have unlimited access to attention from all over the world, which is never before seen. And attention to women is like sex to men. So they've got women hooked with attention, unlimited attention. They've got men hooked with porn, unlimited access to sexual gratification. And that's literally putting us in a situation where America, I don't know about what's going on in Australia, but America's population is like declining. Like the average age here is like somewhere, it's like in the mid 30s or something. It's like people are not procreating. Like literally like 23% of women are single mothers in America. It's the highest in the world. There's like no families. 30% of men under 30 are still virgins. 70% of men in America are obese. 45, or people, not even men, 45% of people in America are morbidly obese. It's not getting put back in like it is. You are literally in your lifetime, in like your children's lifetime, definitely, you will probably see a collapse in America that's like unprecedented, because there's not going to be anybody to do all the things that it's historically done. It's really serious, and this is why it needs to be tackled. And what happens is a lot of people read it and like they think like I'm trying to like jab people. No, I'm just being realistic. You need to stop being idealistic and become realistic, so you don't get your heart broken and destroy yourself believing in the soulmate myth and all this other shit. No, there are good ones.
He created that, didn't they?
Yeah.
There are good. Yeah, girls don't believe in. Girls are not romantic. Women are very pragmatic and they're ruthless. And you guys choose your mates based on like who can provide you what. And you know, men are really idealistic and they're like, I want to make my life about this woman. I love you. You know, and like and it's just like women are just like, dude, just go on your purpose. The second you start catering to women, you become unattractive.
Not all,
to them.
literally.
Yeah.
But it's so true. As soon as someone's too keen or too needy, like, see ya.
Yeah, I think it's like anything, you just got to work at it. Right? Relationships take hard work.
Everything. Absolutely.
Looking after yourself as well. Like you've got to put in the hard work.
Do the work. That's like, and
That's
what I realized is in my life, I had like literally destroyed myself over a woman. And it was only when that didn't work out, because I thought I had my soulmate. And it was only when that shit fell apart and I see like all the bad choices that I made that are actually unattractive to women. But you think we're told to be like that Disney romantic type. We're told to do stuff that actually women eventually get turned off by. It's like, no, you've got to stay on. If you want to keep women attracted to you, you have to be on your purpose. You have to be doing something.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh my God.
And
Got to be out there.
most guys, Most guys, when they get with a woman, they're so happy that they're with a woman, they want to make her their life, you know?
You've just got to, you know what, you got to just, and you've just got to keep to your individual selves and then
Men and
unite
women
together, but
Exactly.
still remain as one,
Yeah.
but come together in that. So you don't lose yourself, right?
Be that
That's
individual
it.
independent person.
Well, thank you.
Yes.
Thanks,
It's been such a
awesome.
pleasure.
Yeah, next time, hopefully, if there is a next time, you guys will teach me some more. I want to learn some more of like the goods on, you know, female nature, and you guys can learn me on all that stuff that's outside my. I actually like learning better than I do
I think
having the burden of performance on a podcast.
I think
So
there's
if you ever want to do like a hangout one where you guys can, you know, carry, you know, treat me like like I don't know my ass from my elbow, because when it comes to a lot of that's like my biggest regret is not learning about health and not learning about how physiology works and all that stuff. I focused on all the wrong shit first, and now I'm realizing, oh, I should have been doing that, not the religious symbolism.
Everything has a place.
Yeah.
Yeah. Your work's amazing, and the world needs to hear it.
We all need both.
Yeah, my work is, my posture isn't though. I've just learned that I've been walking wrong. I've been walking wrong my whole life. So now I've got to like work on that. It's like never ending.
Once you start, you're like, I need now more.
Yeah.
Need to know more.
Well, you're putting one foot in right in front of the left, right?
Yeah.
You're doing something.
Doing something.
All right.
Doing
Next
something
time we'll
right.
do a
Thank
hang.
you.
All right, ladies, have a good night.
Thanks.
Hang on, I'll
Jan.
just hit end and then we can chat.
Oh, okay.
Is that done?